Yeah, it's good to see you.
It's good to see you. Senator Cryan, thanks so much for joining us. And listen, I guess we'll just start with the most obvious news item first, if we could, and that is the ongoing battle in Trenton over marijuana legalization and decriminalization. What's the problem? What's the hangup? People looking in want to know, why isn't this done already? And how do you think it can be resolved?
Well, our caucus is divided, and there's been numerous discussions. I want to compliment Nick Scutari, who's devoted 8 years of his life to this, and the members of the Senate that have spoken on both sides of the issue within our caucus. It's been pretty spirited debate, and that's a good thing for everybody. I actually believe, Max, that we do have or will have a bill that passes, literally breaking news type of stuff, but I think you'll see the Senate Judiciary as we talk on Friday pass this, and then I think you'll see um, the Senate actually vote this bill out on Monday. I think you'll see changes, and the debate has been about young people and their interactions with law enforcement and how to carry a marijuana issue forward. Is it a petty disorderly? Is it a disorderly person? Is it 5 ounces? Is it 4 ounces? And what's the interaction with law enforcement? How long does that carry? I think you'll see in this solution the idea that if there is a penalty for being underage, that it'll only have a 2 year or will expire on your 21st birthday. I think you'll see some creative solutions to that. One thing I can assure you is that no one will be completely satisfied with what the resolution is, but I think sometimes that's the resolution that maybe makes the most sense.
Senator,
Not
it,
con-
it has to satisfy the governor at this point, and it will satisfy him. In other words, that component that addresses the youth will be to his liking, sufficient to sign the bill.
I never speak for Phil Murphy per se. No one does, and you can always get in trouble. But I don't think we would be going through these type of
Understood.
efforts if we didn't think we had the opportunity for the governor's signature.
Right. Senator, I want to get into your specific work and your specific positions on some pieces of critical issues of the time. But you are in a Democratic primary in LD20, and your opponent, in part, is running with the argument that there are too many, for lack of a better way of putting it, Irish American males in positions of power in Trenton. When you look at the governor, you look at the Senate president, the speaker, the senator in the 20th district. What would you say to someone who might be listening to your opponent and saying, well, yeah, that's true. I hadn't really looked at it that way. There seems to be a large concentration of white male power in this state under the auspices of the Democratic Party, which purports to be diverse. What do you say to that?
Well, first thing I'd say is take a look at the record, right? I'm also the man as a majority leader who served under Sheila Oliver. When we talk about records and things like that, it's also about not labels, but it's what you've done. And I have no problem whatsoever talking about issues of social justice, of racial justice, but more importantly, working for the entire district. I think that's where we kind of moved on from each other a bit. My opponents just simply don't see the fact that you need to represent all of the 20th district, which is obviously the privilege I have right now and I hope to have again. You work for a diverse district and you work in many different ways, whether you're working on education funding, whether you're working for bills that help a particular community, whether you're working to make sure that there's equity in terms of transportation dollars, in terms of infrastructure, whether you're working to make sure that your business opportunities, most importantly, and where we talk right now, Max, is in COVID relief, right? I mean, we need the vaccine, we need public health. It's the defining issue, not only of the past year, but I would argue of our generation. How you've handled the pandemic, how you resolved it, where you stand and what you've done. I think when folks take a look at that, they're not going to worry about where you came from. They're going to worry about where you're going. And where you're
Well,
going is to make sure that people are safe, healthy, with an economic future to provide for them and their family.
let's talk about that momentarily. Your opponent has actually engaged in some misinformation about the vaccine and has opposed a bill that would require vaccination for the people of this state. And do you see that as a disqualifier? Is that why he's not on the ticket running for reelection?
Well, he made that choice. He chose to, one of my opponents made a choice to run for Senate when they were already an incumbent. So he made that choice. No one disqualified him from anything. He made that value choice. But I do think the issue of public health, wearing a mask, social distance, promoting public safety is the most fundamental issue of our time. Clearly, whether it's in a variety of actions that people have seen, and they can make up their own minds on the data and the statements that they've seen. I'm for public health. I'm for vaccines. I believe that the way through this is the way that Joe Biden is finally, thank God, attacking it from a presidential leadership standpoint with a Congress that's supportive, that you need more vaccines. You need to make sure vaccines are available to people. As we start to see this open up, we'll see public confidence. You know, the number one issue right now I get in the district and anywhere I go is, can you get me signed up? Is there a place, a way? And we all know that. We hear the phone calls. Clearly, I believe that as we get more vaccine in the pipeline, and I'm hopeful that J&J is also part of that solution with the one shot and the opportunity to bring that to folks that maybe wouldn't have the opportunity to travel out. I think that's the most important issue. And I think that's where the 20th district is going to take a look at who should best lead them. And that's why I believe I'm most qualified.
Senator, is there anything that you believe needs to be legislated urgently on the COVID-19 front? An area where you think you need to re-examine something or adjust or create an opportunity for something to move quicker?
Well, COVID-19 has such a huge definition, right? So clearly, no matter what we do, we've always got more to do in terms of the business community, right? Anybody who's owned a small business, anybody who's been impacted, the unemployment issue, there is much more to be done. Question is do we have the amount and the limits to do it? But there's zero question, there's more to be done. The EDA grants that we do run out quickly. The federal dollars still seem to never be enough. So I do think there's significant work to be done there. And there will be until we climb out of this. Look at something like the Jersey Shore for tourism.
Mhm.
You know, the investments that need to be there for the summer. In my district, the port is a dominant economic carrier. Certainly we need more to make sure that folks are healthy and have the opportunity to work there as well. So I do think those are particular issues. When it comes to public health, do I think we need to go back and do something more? We need more vaccines. In the 20th district, the King University site, the Elizabeth Palmerstown, Peterstown site, all of those opportunities are there, but we need more vaccine. And that I think is coming, and that I think will be the way out of this crisis, this pandemic.
Sir, you're a veteran lawmaker, and in this crisis, what have you done as someone who brings a lot of experience to your position that distinguishes your record in these months where we have been confronted with this scourge?
Well, I never, look, you work as part of a process and a team. And, you know, one of the things I've tried to do is make sure that we work together to do things. And I'll give you an example. When the crisis first broke, essentially a year ago now, a little bit in March, we moved on my staff over to the Kane University site immediately to help with organizing and making sure that we could, frankly, get the testing done that we needed. The initial fights were over PPE. I mean, they seem a long time ago now.
Right.
We were, on the phone to everybody that we possibly could to get more PPE. Folks forget at the time, masks were a huge shortage. Now they're a style piece, right? A clothing style piece. But at the time, those fights were significant. You continue to be a voice for the things that the folks that you have the privilege to represent need. We worked through the testing to a point where we're now at, and by the way, that testing site, again, in partnership with Union County, with the state, you bring your voice and your experience to that. And then you come now to vaccines. It's set up well, it's organized well, but now we need more vaccines. We have continually fought, and this is something I've worked with Nick on, Nick Scutari, continually weighed in for the fact that we in Union County deserve more vaccines, deserve more opportunities for our residents, and we're going to continue to weigh in that way until we get it done.
Sir, could you talk a little bit about some of the key pieces of legislation that you've been involved in over this past term since you last faced the voters? I can think of one that is probably pretty significant, and that is driver's licenses for non-citizens. And you and your running mate, Assemblywoman Quijano, were very much involved in that. Can you talk about the importance of that legislation, what it accomplished, and any other pieces that you find particularly distinguished?
Sure. Um, First off, Annette's a great legislator, and let me be super clear. She carries the work here. This isn't, you do it as part of a team, but Annette's work there in particular was outstanding. There were other outstanding legislators that were part of that as well. Look, I'm a former sheriff. I saw firsthand, and you saw it in the courts. When someone doesn't have a license, they don't have insurance. When they get into a car accident, whether it's you or me, Max, or anybody else who is documented, so to speak, and has insurance, you're the loser. And folks are here. So let's get them a license. It's New Jersey. It's not like you can just jump on the next easy way to get to the next spot. That's not the way mass transportation is designed in this state. And that's an unfortunate consequence. So the reality is we supported the bill because it helps the economy. It helps the folks that do the jobs that in many cases, many people don't want to do. And frankly, from a law enforcement standpoint, public safety standpoint, it made perfect sense. I congratulate, yeah, I was a part of it. Um, I always try to low key what you do because others frankly do more. And I'm proud that Annette Quijano and I are running together. I think it's one of the pieces of legislation we'll stand there for. Particularly for me, without droning on about too many bills, I will tell you that the extension of the WARN Act, the Toys R Us bill, was a big deal. Now, we put it in suspension because of the COVID pandemic and the way businesses are feeling, but ultimately, long term, the importance of giving folks notification and proper economic opportunities when businesses are closing is a big deal. It was a big deal here. It was a hard fight. It's something I'm proud of. In fairness, we've held it back a little. We've suspended the effective date because of the pandemic, but ultimately, long term, it's going to protect constituents that are treated unfairly by big companies. And that's a big part of what I am, and hopefully helps folks out along the way.
Senator, about 10 years ago, you were on the redistricting commission, and it was a very robust debate. It was a great debate because the opposition, the Republican opposition at the time, was very well armed and very determined. And so there were real issues that were debated there. And I remember ultimately the debate came down to, I think if there was a plot or a narrative that defined the dialogue, it was minority representation. And that kind of defined how the districts ultimately were created or recreated. We're on the verge of another redistricting, and whether it happens this year or in 2023, what do you anticipate in terms of the dialogue this time? The political discussion that casts the entire argument.
Good question, Max. And boy, you have a great memory. I'll tell you that. That's for sure. And debate's one word to call some of those discussions.
Right.
There were some others that fit in there, but that's part of the process. And let me tell you something. It was a privilege to be a part of that, and I would recommend to anybody who's politically active that they should participate and monitor the redistricting process. It's a critical piece of what defines New Jersey in the future. I would say the challenge right now is in the data. The census data itself is so questionable. It's one of the previous president's legacies. The threats to undocumented, the estimates of how qualified and how accurate that data is going to be a challenge moving forward. I suspect the congressional redistricting will go first before legislative. Matter of fact, I'm certain of it. Legislative redistricting. And as you know, there's differences, right? In legislative redistricting, you just have to make the number. You can cut into towns. Legislative redistricting requires towns, with the exception of Newark and Jersey City, to remain whole. There'll be significant challenges with that. So I think the first one would be in the data, the quality of the data, and making sure that that data accurately reflects, in particular, Black and brown people, to be perfectly blunt about it. Brown people in particular that were intimidated by this process, that were intimidated by the previous president. And I think that those folks obviously deserve the best representation they can get. So making sure that data is accurate will be ultimately a huge defining challenge. I think the second will be is how do you continue if the Democrats are at 25? We knew when we had the good fortune of our map being selected that we would be optimistic in districts 16 and 11. You and I probably chatted about that along the way. We knew that there would be changes in those districts, and as we saw, we see two Democratic Assembly folks in District 16, and certainly an opportunity here in 21 with Kip Bateman's retirement for a potential Democratic senator. And then you saw in District 16 where Bingo Powell and Joanne and Eric have done such a great job as Democrats moving forward. So I think you'll see a little bit of that where Democrats move and the population shifts. But ultimately, I think the definition of the 2021 Redistricting Commission will be about how good was the data and how good will it hold up.
I just want to note that you are a data guy. And in fact, one of the pieces of legislation that you worked on this past session was ensuring that the measurements of COVID-19 cases were very specific in terms of ethnic and racial background. Is that correct?
That's correct. And I want to thank the Assembly sponsor, Herb Conaway, another data guy driven on a doctor who's driven on science as well. Those are important pieces. It's an important piece of legislation. I'm hopeful we might get it through in the next coming days. I'm certain it'll be done by March. It's important we can recognize from COVID test dating what we're seeing, where the hotspots are. We can measure from the labs. We can actually go back to data to trace. And it's important that we do so because how long this pandemic lasts, part of that will be defined by the vaccine. It will also be defined by the next generation of the virus and what that means and how it spreads. And I think the more and the earlier that we can find out and track hotspots and things like that, the better off we all are. I have the privilege in my day job, I work at a Middlesex County Utility Authority. We're actually involved along with others. Part of the job is a wastewater facility. So the sludge that everyone makes every day, we're participating in the science of monitoring that sludge and being able to pull out any sort of data that may show a COVID-19 expansion as well. It's not ours alone, but we're proud to be a part of it because anything that helps with science in terms of this crisis is what's important.
Mm-hmm. Senator, just a couple more questions if I could. One, I remember going back to that same year, in fact, 2011. That was probably your biggest campaign cycle, right? That's putting it mildly. But how does this cycle differ from that one? I would offer that there was an organization that probably had the support of the governor, although I could never exactly prove it. But certainly there was an organization, at the very least, that was very powerful and very animated and motivated. Do you see that this year, or is it a completely different cycle?
Well, I think I think it is different, Max. I think in that case you saw just a different dynamic, a different time. Here, I think my opponents see things one way, right? One sees a world of public health that's just a different view than I want, than my family wants, and that I want for my grandkids. It's just entirely different. My opponents, I think, are generally looking at the world in a place where they don't want to talk about. We'll see, but I think if we're going to talk about records, I think then I'm pretty proud of what we've done, and I think people will look at that. The 2011 race wasn't anything like that. The 2011 race was exactly the way you clarified it. There was someone in the State House who wanted a change down there. There was work to be done on the top of the ticket level as well, and it was certainly a race to behold. That's for sure. Certainly, I feel confident in the fact that when we talk to voters, and we do all the time because we talk to all of our constituents, that when they see what's done and the record that's there, we're running with the support of the governor this time. I'm proud to be on his line. And at least I'm hopeful that I'll get that line, but I'm pretty confident we will, given the endorsements that we've earned. This is a time where we've been pretty fortunate. Even early on, right now, we've been given a great amount of vote of confidence from folks within the district. It certainly is different than 10 years ago when there was such a split. There's certainly not a lot of split now. It's not all unanimous, but it's pretty close in terms of elected officials and chairs and mayors in the district saying, "Hey, we support you because of what you've done for the district." I think it's a different type of race as a result, and I'm proud of that.
Mhm. I'd like to ask you this, as someone who has been in politics your whole life, really watched as Governor Hughes walked into your father's tavern in Newark, right, and served as the state party chairman, and as you said, assembly majority leader, and as a senator and as a sheriff. I am curious if you see the trajectory of statewide leadership, Senator, in our New Jersey, um, as having been too defined in the Democratic Party recently by corporate candidates. So we had John Corzine from Goldman Sachs, then Phil Murphy from Goldman Sachs, and without getting into their specific records, it just seems to me that we have almost a pattern of people who haven't been legislators, who haven't been in Trenton. And do you think that it's more likely that our next governor will be someone else from Goldman Sachs or a lawmaker from Trenton, A? And B, do you think that Joe Biden may have changed the game somewhat? Because this is a person with a lot of experience, and in a crisis, the Democratic Party rallied around this veteran person from public office who should be that guy that you dismiss immediately, right? He's the guy with the record. We can pin anything on him. They didn't go with a corporate guy. They went with a guy with a lot of government and political experience. So the two-part question, Senator, again, do you think that New Jersey can learn from this? And is it in fact likely that a state lawmaker can ever be governor again or can be governor in the near future? And if not, why? And why not?
Okay. Interesting question, and thanks for the thought. First, I think the next governor will be the current governor. I firmly believe that. I think people have taken a look at Phil Murphy, and do we all have disagreements in this pandemic? Look, I'm in a house with my wife. My kids come over. I wish when we stand outside and see my grandkids, we still have disagreements, right? And every family's going through this at some level or another. I think in Phil Murphy's case, though, that people have made a value choice that he believes in their public safety. Are businesses upset? Yes, and rightly so in some cases, and certainly there's a difference of opinion. But I think people understand that Phil Murphy and the team around him are interested in making sure they're safe first and foremost. We're different than Florida. We're different than other states where we've seen, there's no Sturgis here. There's no North and South Dakota type of outbreaks. Is that good? I think the public has pretty much made a choice. The guy's got my back. And to the second part, and what's interesting to me is, because you set up the question over the fact that it's two Goldmans. The interesting part to me is Phil Murphy is using public financing. Mm-hmm. And I think that's something to be not only applauded, but I also think it speaks to the confidence that the public will engage with him, and the public understands what he's done, and the confidence that they'll reelect him as a result of what he's done in the record. So I think a state lawmaker can. I do. I think for a couple of reasons. Maybe it's just me, but I doubt it, because the folks I talk to feel the same. It feels like Donald Trump was president 100 years ago already. That the public wanted confidence in somebody with experience, somebody they knew, and somebody they trusted, and that was Joe Biden. Right? I think state lawmakers still have that opportunity to do so by getting up and down the state, being around and making sure people understand what their positions are and how they handle themselves and how they do things. So I think there's issues with that. Sure. This isn't a media state. It's hard to get your message out. It just is. It's New Jersey, for all the reasons that we've ever talked about. We just don't have that vehicle that allows for people to define themselves. So media costs and things like that have come to define an election. I think whether I like it or not, independent expenditures and other ways of moving money in campaigns can allow a candidate to do that. So do I think a state lawmaker who's created an, an era of trust, a believability that people want, and may I say first and foremost, the ability to get things done.
Mhm.
Do I think the public can engage with someone like that? Yeah, I do. I think they can. But you better have a record that goes with it. It's one of the issues that I think the Republican frontrunner is going to have here. Doesn't have a record to really show in his time in the assembly what he accomplished or what he didn't. So I think there's going to be some discussions about that along the way, although I don't be too presumptuous. But yeah, I do think those opportunities are there. Everybody should have a shot.
Mhm.
You know, you're not rich. You're not rich. You should still have a shot. And I hope the Democratic Party doesn't become defined by that. I mean, yes, we have a great confidence level in what Phil Murphy's done and a great confidence level in where he's taken the party and where we'll go in the future. But I really believe that our party in particular should be open to everyone. And I hope people that want to be part of the state lawmaking process get a chance to do so. It's interesting. You get a chance to impact people's lives for the better. I'd like to think, whether it's for my kids or for my grandkids, that we've left things better and created some legacy that actually improves people's lives. So I think I hope it's something that, for lack of a better way to put it, the everyman gets a chance to do.
Well, Senator, thank you very much for your time today. I truly appreciate it. I know our readers and our viewers will gain a lot from the interview. So thank you.
Max, always a privilege, and it's good to see you.
Likewise, likewise, sir.
Thanks.
Thank you. Likewise.